Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the whole flock of Israel, you Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, and Haitians. Gotta give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. The Most High, the Heavenly Father, his Hebrew name is Yahweh. Not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not God, not Elohim, not Most High, not Lord, not Yah, not Jah, not Ahaya, not Allah, not Abba, not Yahuwah, not Hashem, not Yahweh, Yahweh, Vave. It's Yahweh. And his only begotten son name in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shah. Not Yahshua, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos, not Jesus Christ, not Serapis Christos, not Yeshaya, not Yehoshua, not Yahusha, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos. It's Yahweh Shah. So got to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah, Bahashim Rekah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles, elder, bishop, and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, who are the apostles and elders of all Israel, whether accepted or not. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim believing this truth and pushing this truth with the four winds of the earth. The entire world shed light to the whole elect. Shalom to the outworld who are listening learning. If you sisters who are listening learning. I'm Isaiah from Jim Mesoleno, Count Prophet of Doom. Coming at you with a lesson of truth, facts, faith, and edification. Of data edification, Lord willing. This be edifying. And this is copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. The allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tilts the balance in favor of fair use. This is for educational purposes only. This is not for monetary gain. I do not own the copyright to this video, to these videos. This is for educational purposes only, Lord willing. You'll be edified. And I'm going to title this lesson, Watching Ezekiel 38 from the pages to the battlefield. Watching Ezekiel 38 play out
President Trump should sit down with the NATO leaders and say, I respect your wishes and your interests. Now I'm telling you that we want an end to conflict with Russia. And we want you to sit down with the Russians and help negotiate an end to the conflict. In return for that, we'll back away from the notion of seizing the territory of Greenland. And we'll do everything in our power to cooperate as you would like. But you've got to end this war with Russia. That's something that he could do. He could lead the way. He could lift sanctions. He needs to get control of his own government. He's talking to people like Lindsey Graham and this man Blumenthal and others who think it's their God-given right to drive us all into a war with Russia. They have no right to do that. That is absolutely outrageous nonsense. No American wants it. He's the president. He's there to represent the larger interests of the American people, and those interests do not include war with Russia or China, and I would argue with anybody else. But, you're asking him to look at the world differently and put these Europeans where they belong into the place that they occupy. I've always said we are effectively de facto, for all intents and purposes, the modern equivalent of the Roman Empire. What did the Romans do with the Greek city-states? The Europeans are effectively the equivalent of the Greek city-states. Eventually, the Romans said, thank you very much. You're going to behave yourselves. You're going to stop fighting with each other. You're not going to start any wars because it's bad for business. And it stopped, and the Greeks became part of the larger Roman Empire, and there was peace for hundreds of years as a result. He needs to stand up, and if he talks about leading, he talks about being in command. He wants to be the tough guy, the godfather of everything. Well, then act like it, but act like it intelligently. And right now, it's this vague, chaotic approach to everything. In other words, it's like the kid who picks up the machine gun and starts spraying the room with bullets. Well, you'll eventually hit something, but in the meantime, you're going to do a lot of damage, and you're not going to get what you want, and somebody's going to cap you with one round. I mean, that's effectively what it comes down to. I don't want to get that far, and I don't want our country to be capped with one round. But I think the Russians are sick of us. They're tired of us. They don't really trust us anymore because they see what we are discussing, chaos. The Chinese are looking at it from the same standpoint. And remember, everybody in the world wants to do business. But for business to be successful, the market has to be stable. The supply chains have to work. The transportation from one end of the world to the other has to be secure. All of that is up in question right now because of Donald Trump and his chaotic approach.
Well, Doug, if we stop the conversation right there, then people would come away with understanding that there's a lot of problems and a lot of things that President Trump could do, a lot of leverage he actually has to really bring a lot of things to fruition to the benefit of the United States, to the benefit to Ukraine, to the benefit to Europe. He could do those if he was willing to use his leverage. So far, he is not. Now, what worries me the most, back to this issue of chaos, is probably the biggest problem that we have on the horizon right now, and that is with Iran. So the question is, of course, this goes back to 2025 when we attacked Iran, and we had all the two aircraft carrier battle groups there. We were working with Israel, this 12-day war and all that kind of stuff, right? So we had this big power of military buildup. We took this action, and then we stopped. Now then, Trump is saying that he is potentially on the verge of doing something again. A lot of evidence suggests that he is. And he was asked yesterday, Mr. President, if you attack Iran and they make good on their claim that they're going to attack Israel and American bases in the region, what do you say to that? Watch his answer.
Iran says that it will retaliate in the instance of U.S. strikes against U.S. assets in the Middle East. What do you say to U.S. service members about why it is worth the risk to intervene in Iran?
Yeah, Iran said that the last time I blew them up with the nuclear capability, which they don't have any longer. So Iran said that the last time. They better behave.
So they better behave. It sounds to me, Doug, you tell me if you disagree. It sounds to me like he is gambling that Iran won't respond if we come in and hit them hard over this alleged killing protesters or whatever, which is all a big canard anyway. But it sounds to me like he's gambling with the lives of American troops in the region that they won't attack them, because if they do, a lot of these missiles will get right through the air defense and just slice through and could potentially kill a lot of Americans. How do you see it?
I'm sure.
And just like these guys saying, Trump is putting all of you Americans, all you so-called patriots of America in jeopardy. That man is putting all of you Americans in jeopardy.
I'm sure that has been discussed with Vice President Vance. Now, how much have they told President Trump and how willing he is to listen is unclear. But I think we need to keep in mind that, frankly, Iran now has the missile power, the striking power, to effectively annihilate most of Israel. That should not be ignored, because we should have an interest in making sure Israel survives. Israel is operating as a free agent, but it really isn't, because without our backing, without our support, without our readiness to intervene on their behalf, they are at very high risk in the region. It's not just, excuse me, it is not just Iran anymore. Iran has by far the largest arsenal of missiles with non-nuclear warheads of anybody in the world, in all likelihood. We know from previous experience that the hypersonic weapons are absolutely going to penetrate. And we're talking about weapons that fly from 4,000 to 7,000 miles per hour. We have trouble identifying them, tracking them, let alone engaging them. Now, we've come a long way. We've actually created some new radar technology from existing technologies that are better than what we had previously. We have built a lot of missiles, but we haven't built that many. And we're not really in a position, having not mobilized for an all-out war the way Russia has, to match the production lines that exist today in China, Russia, and Iran. Then that brings us to the next point. Will Russia and China simply sit this out? It's pretty clear that if we get involved with the Israelis in an all-out war against Iran, which is what I think we're courting right now, we may not understand that that's what will happen, but I think that's exactly what could happen. The Chinese purchase roughly 30% of their oil from the Persian Gulf region. If that is shut down for some reason, the Chinese have a vital strategic interest, an existential interest in joining that conflict to ensure they can get what they need. Now, how they will do that is anybody's guess. I doubt seriously it would involve troops on the ground. But I think the Chinese would certainly engage in any way they could to support, assist, and help the Iranians, and that includes probably naval power. The Russians are very sensitive to their southern flank, what is south of Central Asia and the nations that touch on Central Asia. And they will become very interested, and they are not going to allow Iran to sink into chaos or destruction. And now finally there's Turkey, and the Turks have always been the 500-pound gorilla in the corner. The Turks have by far the best ground force. They have a solid air force. They are now building most of their own weapons, but they've had their share of economic trouble. Qatar has helped them to survive, as some other nations have. They've got good relations now with the Russians, which I think they want to preserve. They don't want to put those at risk. And I think they would like to get along with us, but they have a big problem with the Israelis and the Kurds. Just a few days ago, an estimated 400 Kurdish fighters tried to work their way in from Syria into Iran. And the Turks and the Iranians cooperated to identify this group of 400 and to annihilate them, which they did. We and the Israelis and MI6 have been backing and pushing and supporting the Kurds against the Turks for a very long time. I think Mr. Erdogan is reaching the point now where he can't tolerate much more because the Israelis have now established themselves in Syria, south of Damascus, with the potential to actually threaten Damascus, even take it. These are unacceptable developments to the Turks. They're also very uncomfortable with Israeli attacks on Lebanon and northern Lebanon, whether they involve Hezbollah or anybody else. So we have a growing nexus of opposition to Israel, greater Israel, and our influence between the Turks and the Iranians. Now, how far does this go? What will this produce? That's anybody's guess. But at some point, your potential opponents have to ask themselves, how much longer do I hold back? How much restraint do I exercise when it becomes clear that my potential opponents in Israel and Washington are determined to destroy me? At some point, you say, the hell with it. We're just going to go all out because we have no real choice. And if we don't, we're going to be finished anyway. So I think that's the attitude that's growing in the Middle East. I don't think the Chinese and the Russians feel that way, but the Chinese and the Russians have a great deal strategically at risk in the region. And they're not going to stand by and watch us destroy it or watch the Israelis with our help destroy it.
And one wonders, I'm even just looking, kind of circling back to the original post we made at the start of this episode here, where the question was to Trump, how is all these international things affecting the domestic issue and how much he needs that for the next 3 years of things, as you said, some things that are important, for our own national security on our borders, et cetera. But if Trump takes this gamble that Iran won't do what you just said and finally say, all right, screw it. I don't have anything to hold on. I have a reason to hold back. And by the way, what you mentioned a second ago, all these protests that are going on there clearly were not just domestically inspired. Mike Pompeo himself was.
Hey, and this is why it reads in Obadiah chapter 1 and 6. How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? Through information gathering, man. As the Lord said, he gonna make their own tongue to fall upon themselves, right? Well, on top of that, this is Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter, right? And what's the precept? Ecclesiasticus, man. We searching out these matters. Where is it? Is it 5? I think it's 5. Ecclesiasticus 5:15. Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small. So the Lord gave us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to search out these things of Esau, Edom. Because again, Obadiah said, how are the things of Esau searched out? How is hidden things sought up? Well, it's through these devils. These devils, the Lord said he gonna make their own tongue fall upon themselves. But the Lord put the Holy Spirit on the apostles, elder bishops, elders, and our apostles, elders before them. But they have done the research, man. So now the Lord, everything that was written in the scriptures that the apostles, elder bishops, and elders have filtered the world information, which is prophecy happening through the scriptures. Now the Lord is confirming it by making their own tongue fall upon themselves. But also, even without the Edomites bringing this information out, because what they just doing is bringing out what we can't gather, because these are the insiders. So the insiders is bringing out what was already written in the scriptures, that's the Lord confirming the word of his servants. Isaiah 44 in 24, thus saith Yahweh thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am Yahweh that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself, that frustrateth the token of the liars, and maketh diviners mad, that turneth wise men backward, and maketh their knowledge foolish, that confirmeth the word of his servant, and perform the counsel of his messengers. So this is the Lord confirming the word of his servant, which is the words of the Lord. Romans 15:4 reads, the things that was written before time ago for our learning, man. So here's the Lord showing us how the things that Esau searched out in his things sought up, man. It's through their actions. It's through their war crimes.
On his X-Post on, I think, January the 3rd, was bragging about how Mossad is on the ground there. Congratulations. Good job with that. So it's clearly that's something we're trying to foment to cause this belli for Trump to go in and do something. If he takes that risk.
I make the point all the time. The Lord have given us these talents to gather all the intel on Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, and on the other heathen, because they all our enemies. The Lord has given us the talents to gather all the intel of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, because he's the top enemy of the Heavenly Father Yahweh. When you read Psalms 83, it mentions Edom first in Psalms 83. So the Lord gave us these talents to gather all the intel, filter it through the scriptures, and then feed it to the flock, man, to prepare the whole flock for what's about to come, which is Jacob's trouble, which is the mark of the beast, which is the RAFID micro C here, whether you believe it or not. World War III, Jacob's trouble, the mark of the beast. But we watching all the war crimes of Esau,
what concerns do you have for how the loss of American troops can be perceived by the base? Will they say, you took this action and now then you're causing Americans to be killed that otherwise wouldn't have? Or do you think that I can only imagine they would, the administration will then try to use their deaths as saying, oh my gosh, see, we have to go further. We have to get into a war with Iran and fight it till we win, etc. How would you see that playing out if this spark turns into a flame?
Well, this is highly speculative, and none of us knows with absolute certainty what the response would be. But I think our economy is very fragile. I would watch our bond market very carefully. We just had a massive sell-off in the 30-year treasuries. I would watch for the 10-year treasury carefully, see where that goes. And I'm not saying something that's unique. Warren Buffett has said the same thing. Ray Dalio has said the same thing. Alistair McLeod has said the same thing. Luke Groman has said the same thing. People that are much more knowledgeable about the financial system than I am, they're all pointing to that fragility. Any perceived setback overseas that involved an indisputable defeat of American military power could have very serious consequences here at home financially for us. And then when you look at the problems inside our country, we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. There's a lot of confusion. We're looking at these anti-ICE organizations that are springing up that are increasingly funded by some of the same people that funded Antifa and Black Lives Matter and so forth. So we have the domestic unrest and discontent being sponsored against this government. Again, I think we should focus here, because I think what happens here in the United States will determine the future of our country, not what we do in the Middle East, not what we do in Greenland or Venezuela or anywhere else. But, you know, I hold the minority opinion here in Washington. Most people, as you know, don't see it that way. So I think there's a very high probability that if we did get ourselves into a major conflict with Iran or somebody like that, and we made these bellicose statements that we're going to crush them and we're going to win and on and on and on, the American people probably would not be very supportive of that. I don't think it would resonate at all.
Yeah, let's hope that stays in the theoretical and we don't actually have to find out.
Now here's the top guy in the game, this Colonel Douglas McGregor. Top guy in the game, man.
Let me tell you something about the Oreshnik strike that you won't hear on CNN or Fox News. This wasn't a missile attack. This was a conversation. A very expensive, very precise, very terrifying conversation between nuclear powers that most people completely missed. And if you don't understand what was actually said in that conversation, you're not going to understand how close we just came to crossing a line that nobody comes back from. The mainstream media is calling it an escalation. The Pentagon is calling it a provocation. European leaders are calling it aggression. What they're not calling it is what it actually was, a final warning delivered in the only language that Washington seems to understand anymore. Because here's what really happened when that Oreshnik hypersonic missile hit that Ukrainian defense facility. Russia just demonstrated that they can strike any target in Europe with a weapon that NATO has no defense against. Any target, anytime, with 6 minutes of flight time from launch to impact. Think about that for a minute. 6 minutes from Russian territory to any military installation, any command center, any government building in Western Europe. 6 minutes during which there is absolutely nothing that our missile defense systems can do except watch. The Aegis systems we've deployed across Europe, useless against hypersonic weapons. The Patriot batteries that cost $3 billion each. They're designed for 1980s Soviet missiles, not 2020's hypersonic delivery systems. The THAAD interceptors that we claim can stop ballistic missiles. They can't even track weapons moving at Mach 10 through unpredictable flight paths. That's not a tactical capability. That's a strategic game changer. And the Russians didn't use it to destroy a critical military target or inflict massive casualties. They used it to send a message that every NATO commander from Brussels to Norfolk is now trying to figure out how to respond to. But let's back up and talk about how we got here, because this Oreshnik demonstration didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened at the end of a 2-year escalation cycle that Washington and European capitals have been driving while pretending they could control the outcomes. First, we sent defensive weapons to Ukraine, then offensive weapons, then advanced air defense systems, then long-range missiles. Then we started providing satellite targeting data, then intelligence support, then training, then maintenance, then personnel. Each step was sold as a limited escalation that wouldn't provoke Russian response. Each step crossed another red line that Moscow had drawn clearly and publicly. And each time the Russians responded, we acted surprised and escalated further. Remember when sending Javelin anti-tank missiles was considered a major escalation? That was 18 months ago. Now we're providing real-time satellite intelligence for strikes deep inside Russian territory, and wondering why they're responding with weapons systems that didn't exist in our threat assessments. This isn't strategy. This is sleepwalking into nuclear confrontation one step at a time, while convincing ourselves that the other side won't respond decisively. Well, guess what? They just responded decisively. The Oreshnik strike was Russia's way of saying, you want to play escalation games? Here's what the next level looks like. Are you sure you want to keep climbing this ladder? And the terrifying thing is that most people in Washington still don't understand what they're being shown. Let me explain the technical realities that make this weapon so strategically significant. Hypersonic missiles travel at speeds greater than Mach 5, roughly 3,800 miles per hour, but the Oreshnik system travels at Mach 10 or higher. That's over 7,600 miles per hour. At those speeds, the missile generates a plasma field that makes it invisible to most radar systems. It follows an unpredictable flight path that makes interception nearly impossible. And it carries multiple independently targeted warheads that can strike different targets simultaneously. But here's what makes it truly revolutionary. The kinetic energy alone from an impact at those speeds is equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. You don't need explosive warheads when you're hitting targets with that much kinetic force. The physics of the impact does the damage. In practical terms, this means Russia can now strike any NATO military facility in Europe with conventional warheads, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. No Patriot batteries, no THAAD systems, no European missile defenses, nothing. But here's the really scary part. Those warheads don't need to be conventional. The same delivery system can carry nuclear payloads, which means Russia just demonstrated they can deliver nuclear weapons to any target in Europe faster than NATO can respond. The flight time from launch sites in western Russia to NATO headquarters in Brussels is approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pentagon in Washington, 8 minutes from submarine-launched versions. Command centers that we assumed were secure because of distance and defensive systems are now completely vulnerable to weapons that can't be intercepted. That's not a military capability. That's a revolution in strategic balance. And they demonstrated it by hitting a single facility with conventional warheads as a warning shot. That's strategic restraint combined with overwhelming capability demonstration. It's probably the most sophisticated deterrence message in military history. But Washington's response tells you everything you need to know about how completely our leadership misunderstands what they're dealing with. Instead of recognizing a final warning, they're treating it as another provocation that requires further escalation. President Biden authorized longer-range missile strikes deeper into Russian territory. European leaders are talking about sending more advanced weapons systems. NATO is discussing additional deployment of troops and equipment to Eastern Europe. Secretary of Defense Austin announced that we're accelerating deployment of new missile defense systems to Europe, apparently unaware that those systems are designed for threats that are already obsolete. It's like announcing plans to defend against cavalry charges while the other side is demonstrating tank warfare. It's like someone just demonstrated they can burn down your house anytime they want, and your response is to throw matches at their yard while standing in a pool of gasoline. This is exactly the kind of escalation cycle that leads to nuclear war. Not through planned aggression, but through miscalculation and misunderstanding where each side thinks they can control outcomes that nobody can actually control. The Russians are trying to establish clear boundaries. They're saying, this is as far as we allow this conflict to go. Beyond this point, we start using capabilities that change everything. But Washington keeps interpreting boundary setting as bluffing that requires calling. That's not how nuclear deterrence works. When someone with 10,000 nuclear warheads tells you where their red lines are, the smart response is not to test whether they're serious. But here's what really bothers me about this whole situation. The American people have no idea how close their government is pushing this toward actual nuclear confrontation, because nobody in Washington wants to admit that we're not managing escalation. Escalation is managing us. Every step in this process has been driven by events rather than strategy. We react to Russian moves, they react to our moves, and everybody pretends they're controlling a situation that's clearly spiraling beyond anyone's control. The latest example? Ukrainian forces used American-supplied ATACMS missiles to strike targets inside Russia last week. Those missiles require American satellite guidance, American intelligence, and American technical support to operate. In what universe is that not direct American participation in attacks on Russian territory? The Oreshnik demonstration should have been a moment for strategic reassessment, a moment to ask whether whatever we think we're achieving in Ukraine is worth risking nuclear war over. A moment to consider whether there might be diplomatic solutions that don't require testing the boundaries of nuclear deterrence. Instead, we're getting more escalation and more rhetoric about not being intimidated by Russian threats. But these aren't threats. Threats are what you say when you can't actually do something. What Russia just demonstrated is capability. They can actually do what they're warning about. That's not a threat, that's physics. And the physics of hypersonic weapons have just changed the strategic equation in ways that most people don't understand yet. Because this isn't just about one weapon system. It's about the fact that the entire NATO approach to collective defense assumes we can see incoming attacks soon enough to respond. That assumption is now obsolete. When you can't detect incoming weapons until 6 minutes before impact, traditional defensive strategies don't work anymore. You can't scramble fighters, you can't evacuate personnel, you can't activate countermeasures. The early warning systems that we spent decades building to detect Soviet ballistic missiles, they're designed for weapons that follow predictable trajectories at predictable speeds. Hypersonic weapons follow unpredictable flight paths at unprecedented speeds while generating plasma signatures that confuse radar systems. Your only option is deterrence, which means making sure that conflicts never reach the point where those weapons get used. But deterrence only works when both sides understand each other's capabilities and limitations and respect each other's core interests. Right now, we have a situation where one side is demonstrating overwhelming capabilities while the other side is pretending those capabilities don't matter. That's not stable deterrence. That's a recipe for catastrophic miscalculation. Let me put this in terms that regular Americans can understand. Imagine your neighbor has been gradually encroaching on your property for 2 years. Each time you complain, they take a little more. Finally, you fire a warning shot into the air to show you're serious about defending your boundaries. Their response is to bring more people onto your property and start building permanent structures. At what point do you stop firing warning shots and start shooting to kill? That's essentially where we are in this escalation cycle. The Russians just fired their warning shot with the Oreshnik demonstration. Our response is to escalate further. At some point, the warnings stop and the shooting becomes real. And when nuclear powers start shooting at each other for real, everybody loses. There are no winners in nuclear war. There are only different degrees of losing. But here's what's really insane about this whole situation. The conflict that's driving us toward nuclear confrontation doesn't actually serve American interests. It serves the interests of defense contractors, foreign policy establishment egos, and political figures who mistake activity for achievement. Regular Americans get no benefit from risking nuclear war over Ukrainian territorial disputes. They get no benefit from testing Russian red lines to see how far we can push before something breaks. They get no benefit from escalation that increases the chances their cities get vaporized over issues they have no say in. What they get is higher defense spending that comes out of their taxes, higher global instability that affects their economic security, and higher chances of nuclear conflict that threatens their survival. Also, Washington can avoid admitting that some problems can't be solved through military pressure. The cost of military aid to Ukraine has already exceeded $170 billion. That's more than we spend annually on transportation infrastructure, veterans' health care, or education assistance combined. We're funding foreign conflicts while American infrastructure crumbles and American students accumulate crushing debt. The Russians understand this perfectly. They're not trying to threaten American civilians or American territory. They're trying to establish boundaries around conflicts that don't affect American security but could escalate into nuclear war if not properly managed. That's why the Oreshnik demonstration targeted a military facility in Ukraine rather than a NATO installation in Poland or Germany. They're showing capability while limiting provocation. They're establishing boundaries while leaving room for de-escalation. But our response is to interpret restraint as weakness and boundary setting as aggression. We're treating strategic communication as tactical provocation that requires military response. This is how nuclear wars start, not through planned aggression, but through misunderstanding and miscalculation by leaders who think they can control situations that are beyond anyone's control. The Cuban Missile Crisis taught us that nuclear powers need clear communication channels and mutual understanding of red lines to avoid catastrophic miscalculation. But we seem to have forgotten those lessons while pursuing policies that make clear communication impossible and red lines irrelevant. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy and Khrushchev maintained direct communication channels, and both sides understood the other's core security concerns. Both leaders recognized that nuclear war would be catastrophic for everyone, and worked to find face-saving solutions that avoided escalation. Today, we have no meaningful communication channels with Moscow, no apparent understanding of Russian security concerns, and no interest in face-saving solutions that might prevent catastrophic escalation. The Russians are trying to re-establish those boundaries through demonstration rather than destruction. The Oreshnik strike was strategic communication, not tactical aggression. It was designed to clarify rather than confuse, to establish limits rather than eliminate options. But Washington's response suggests we're not interested in communication or limits. We're interested in dominance and control over situations that can't be dominated or controlled without risking nuclear war. That's not strategic thinking. That's strategic incompetence on a scale that threatens the survival of civilization. Because when nuclear powers stop communicating effectively, they start shooting effectively. And when nuclear powers start shooting at each other, everybody dies. The Oreshnik demonstration was Russia's attempt to avoid that outcome by establishing clear boundaries while demonstrating overwhelming capability to enforce those boundaries. It was deterrence in action, designed to prevent larger conflict by making the costs of escalation crystal clear. Our response should be recognizing those boundaries and finding diplomatic solutions that respect core interests on both sides. Instead, we're escalating further while pretending that superior technology and strategic determination can overcome the physics of nuclear weapons. But physics doesn't care about political determination or military superiority. Physics says that when nuclear powers fight directly, everybody loses regardless of who has better technology or stronger alliances. The Russians just reminded us of that physics lesson with the Oreshnik demonstration. They showed us what the next level of this escalation looks like while giving us the opportunity to step back from the brink. The question is whether we're smart enough to take that opportunity or stupid enough to keep climbing the escalation ladder until somebody falls off and takes the rest of the world with them. Stares directly into camera. Because that's not a metaphor. That's the choice we're facing right now. And the clock is ticking faster than most people realize. The next demonstration might not be against a facility in Ukraine. It might be against a NATO base in Poland or a command center in Germany. And at that point, Article 5 gets triggered, and we're in World War III whether we want to be or not. The Russians just showed us their cards. They have weapons that can reach any target in Europe faster than we can respond to defend those targets. The question is whether we're going to fold or keep raising the stakes until the whole table explodes.
Alright, so this is heavy right here. This is heavy right here because Putin mentions the weak nations, but they are becoming strong now. But he mentioned the weak nations. He's going into the point of Babylon trying to, the dictator, Babylon the Great. And the video I played with Colonel McGregor, he mentioned that we are Rome, which America is the revived Roman Empire, man. It's a lot going on. And these Edomites be mentioning all this information. They have no clue, man. Because it was already written in the scriptures a 4 time ago. But it's for Israel's learning. For the whole elect. And Putin says a lot in this short little 10-minute clip right here, man. But this is, let me get this real quick. See, man, it's the same old precepts, man. Different videos and different articles, man. Obadiah 1 and 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall I not in that day, saith Yahweh, even destroy the wise men out of Edom and the understanding out of Mount of Esau? And Pooh mentioned in this clip too, he talking about peace. And see, this is what the Lord said in Proverbs 21 and 1. the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, man. See, everybody, they trying to establish peace, and this is why the Lord got Babylon the Great rousing up all the all the allies, man. Which is this, let me get this, same old precepts, man. Same old precepts. Isaiah 42:13. It reads, Yahweh shall go forth as a mighty man. He shall stir up jealousy like a man of war. He shall cry, yea, roar. He shall prevail against his enemies. I have long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrained myself. Now will I cry like a prophetic woman. I will destroy and devour at once. Hey, this is Yahweh. Listen to what Putin say, man. Heavy, man.
January 2026. For Russia, this moment does not arrive with drama or urgency. There is no emergency speech from the Kremlin, no raised alert levels broadcast to the public. A silo opens, telemetry systems activate. A missile rises exactly on schedule. Data streams back to command centers. Engineers confirm what they already expected. The RS-28 Sarmat II performs within design parameters. The test ends. From Moscow's perspective, the mission is complete. This is not escalation. This is maintenance of strategic balance. Russia does not test intercontinental missiles to send emotional messages. It tests them to confirm that deterrence still works. And in 2026, with arms control frameworks effectively frozen and NATO missile defenses expanding eastward, confirming that reality has become essential. The Sarmat II is not a response to one war, one crisis, or one political moment. It is the culmination of a long strategic calculation that began years ago when Russia concluded that the post-Cold War security architecture was no longer stable. Treaties collapsed, assurances eroded, missile defense sites appeared closer to Russian borders. The conclusion in Moscow was simple: deterrence had to be rebuilt, not debated. Sarmat II is that rebuild. Unlike many Western systems designed around limited threats or regional contingencies, Sarmat II was built for the worst-case scenario. It replaces aging Soviet-era missiles not just with newer hardware, but with a fundamentally different philosophy. Flexibility replaces predictability. Survivability replaces numbers. Uncertainty replaces assumptions. With a throw weight exceeding 10 tons, Sarmat II can carry a wide range of payload configurations. Traditional, multiple, independently targetable re-entry vehicles, hypersonic glide vehicles, penetration aids, decoys, mixed packages designed to overwhelm detection and interception systems simultaneously. This is not excess capability. This is strategic insurance. From Russia's point of view, missile defense systems do not need to be fully effective to be destabilizing. They only need to create doubt. Sarmat II exists to eliminate that doubt. It ensures that no adversary can believe, even briefly, that a first strike could neutralize Russia's response. That belief, or the lack of it, is the foundation of deterrence. One of the most significant elements confirmed during the 2026 test is trajectory freedom. Sarmat II is not limited to traditional polar routes that Cold War defenses were built to monitor. It can approach targets from southern vectors, over oceans and regions historically outside NATO's early warning focus. This capability alone forces a complete reassessment of missile defense coverage. From Moscow's perspective, this is not an aggressive feature. It is a logical response. When defenses are positioned with specific expectations in mind, a credible deterrent must violate those expectations. Predictability favors interception. Unpredictability favors stability. The missile's throw weight phase further complicates defense planning. Hypersonic glide vehicles detach at extreme altitudes and speeds, maneuvering unpredictably through the atmosphere. This is not simply about speed, although speeds exceeding Mach 10 leave minimal reaction time. It is about decision compression. Commanders have fewer seconds to assess, classify, and respond. In strategic terms, hesitation equals deterrence. Russia understands that modern conflict is as much psychological as it is physical. That is why the Sarmat 2 test was conducted quietly. No dramatic footage, no countdowns for the public, no threats issued alongside the launch. The message was not aimed at television audiences. It was aimed at analysts, planners, and military staffs, the people who model scenarios and build escalation ladders. Those ladders just lost several rungs. Importantly, Russia does not intend to mass-produce Sarmat 2 in enormous numbers. Strategic deterrence does not require volume. It requires reliability. A limited number of survivable, flexible systems is enough to anchor stability. Moscow's doctrine has never been about numerical dominance. It has been about guaranteed response. That distinction matters. Western discourse often frames new Russian strategic systems as destabilizing. Moscow sees the opposite. From its perspective, instability arises when one side believes it can act without consequence. Sarmat 2 removes that illusion. It restores symmetry, not in numbers, but in risk. The 2026 test also reinforces a broader Russian message. Strategic weapons are not bargaining chips. Sarmat 2 is not leverage for negotiations. It is the baseline reality upon which any future arms control discussion must rest. Russia will not negotiate from a position of assumed vulnerability. It will negotiate from confirmed capability. That approach may be uncomfortable for NATO, but it is consistent. Another key element highlighted by the test is survivability. Sarmat 2 is deployed in hardened silos designed to withstand extreme overpressure. Mobility is not its role, resilience is. Combined with early warning redundancy and automated command and control systems, the missile ensures retaliation even under worst-case conditions. This is not about winning a nuclear war. It is about making one unthinkable. From Moscow's point of view, missile defense systems reduce the likelihood of escalation in conventional conflicts as well. When strategic balance is firm, regional confrontations are less likely to spiral uncontrollably. The Sarmat 2 test therefore stabilizes not just the nuclear domain, but the broader security environment. That is the logic Russia operates under. The test also sends an internal message. To Russian engineers, scientists, and military planners, it confirms that domestic industrial capacity remains capable of producing world-class strategic systems despite sanctions, pressure, and isolation. Sarmat 2 is not a paper project, it is operational reality. To Russian leadership, it confirms continuity. No matter who sits in foreign capitals, no matter how alliances shift, Russia's core deterrent remains under its own control. That continuity is central to Moscow's long-term worldview. For NATO, the implications are sobering. Existing missile defense systems, Patriot, Aegis Ashore, even THAAD in limited numbers, were never designed to counter a system like Sarmat 2 in a full-spectrum scenario. They may intercept individual threats, they may provide limited coverage, but they do not negate deterrence. Russia knows this. That is why it feels no need to threaten Europe with Sarmat 2. The system's existence speaks for itself. The January 2026 test closes a chapter that began when the Cold War ended and uncertainty took its place. Russia has completed the modernization of its strategic forces. The deterrent is updated. The assumptions of the past no longer apply. This is not about fear. This is not about escalation. This is about permanence.
right, so real quick, I want to show you this clip here. Putin give a message, and he give a lecture
First
in
of all,
Kremlin.
I would like to extend a heartfelt welcome to you in the
NATO
Kremlin
envoys.
at the
Listen to
formal
this.
ceremony for the presentation of credentials. Our meeting is taking place at the very beginning of the new year, when all of us are making plans for the future, and of course, want to hope that hardships and adversities, mutual grievances and conflicts will remain in the past. Taking this opportunity, I would like to sincerely wish you, your families, and the peoples of the states you represent well-being and success in the coming year 2026. I believe you will agree that one of the key factors of sustainable development and the prosperity of humanity is international cooperation. In today's diverse and interconnected world, universal stability and security directly depend on the ability of states to engage in constructive interaction. An open, honest partnership provides opportunities to resolve common, even the most complex problems. It is no coincidence that people say peace does not come by itself. It is built, and built every day. Peace requires effort, responsibility, and a conscious choice. The relevance of this is obvious, especially now, when the situation on the international arena is increasingly deteriorating. I think no one will argue with this. Long-standing conflicts are intensifying, and new serious hotbeds of tension are emerging. At the same time, diplomacy, the search for consensus and compromise solutions, are increasingly being replaced by unilateral and highly dangerous actions. And instead of dialogue between states, we hear the monologue of those who, by the right of the strong, consider it permissible to dictate their will, to lecture others on how to live, and to give orders. Dozens of countries around the world suffer from disrespect for their sovereign rights, from chaos and lawlessness, and do not have the strength and resources to stand up for themselves. A reasonable way out of this situation is seen in more persistently demanding that all members of the international community comply with international law, as well as in providing real support to the emerging new, more just, multipolar world order. A world order in which all states would have the right to their own model of growth, to independently, without external influence, determine their own destiny, while preserving their distinctive culture and traditions. I would note that Russia is sincerely committed to the ideals of a multipolar world. Our country has always pursued, and will continue to pursue, a balanced and constructive foreign policy course, taking into account both our national interests and the objective trends of global development. With all partners interested in cooperation, we are prepared to maintain truly open and mutually beneficial relations, to deepen ties in politics, the economy, and the humanitarian sphere, and together to counter acute challenges and common threats. Russia advocates strengthening the key, central role of the United Nations in world affairs, which celebrated its anniversary last year. 80 years ago, our fathers and grandfathers,
See that? Diplomatic takedown. Putin lectures silent NATO envoys in the Kremlin. And he talking like that. He said this. I did a lesson on this. Putin. Right here. See, this is the Lord. Yahweh Shem Shah got the guard speaking, man. And he mentioned the weaker nations. It reads, Putin has decided that Russia is going to be a safe haven for people who want to trade liberal Western ways for Russian moral values. Now listen, let me go to the blue letter and show you this. No, I'm going to go to the blue letter. I'm going to read it here. In Ezekiel 38, right? Let's read Ezekiel 38:1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith Yahweh power, behold, I am against thee, O God, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. So you heard him talk about peace and nothing. No, the Lord, and he mentioned the rebuild of the Soviet Union, man. Verse 4, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. That's the Lord turning the modern Russia back to the Soviet Union, just built back better, man. Built back greater. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thy horses, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor. So the Lord said he's going to put hooks into his jaws, right? It's just like a horse with a bit in his mouth. The Lord is controlling this. And the Lord is using Gog what was the title I said? Gog, or Russia, or Putin, a better Edomite for destruction. Even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarter and all his bands, and many people with thee. And even when you go to the commentary, David Guza said they know talking about this, talking about Persia, it's talking about Iran and Turkey and these other nations, man. Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou God unto them. Now I want to go to this right here, right? Because verse 11, let's read. Matter of fact, let's just keep reading, right? Come get down to 11. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. So now, Israel is the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, but mainly here in America. America is this place. Listen, thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land. Thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Now we know Israel going to be destroyed too, but it's talking about America, Babylon the Great. See, the Lord is finna judge. Listen, the Lord has a judgment. He has a controversy with you Israelites, man. You so-called Negro, Latino, Native Americans, West Indians, and Haitians. Everybody else is just collateral damage and casualties of war. Listen to what the Lord is saying to God. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Verse 9. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Thus saith Yahweh power, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. This is America. Unwalled villages meaning there's no defense system. I will go to them that are at rest. That's America. These Americans that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thy hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, America, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, that dwell in the midst of the land. It's talking about America. But this is the Lord finna judge 2/3 of our people, man. But this is the Lord showing, it say unwalled villages, which is no defense. When you go to this, and I went to this in the commentary to look up this unwalled villages, and it said without a defense. Look, let me go to it real quick, just to prove this. Even though David Guza ain't nobody, but just to show you what he say. Let's go to text commentary. David Guza, right? Ezekiel 38. Scroll down. Bear with me here. Hey, cause and then I'm gonna go to Joel 2. Joel 2 said the same thing. Let me see, where is it? This is beautiful, man. Nope, right here. Let's go back up. Right here. So this is David Guzik. He got Ezekiel 38:10 through 13, right? Thus saith the Lord power, on that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you will make an evil plan. You will say, I will go up against the land of unwalled villages. I will go up to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates. That's America, Babylon the Great. But the 12 tribes of Israel that's here, man, living comfortable, man. That's why Isaiah 3:1, the Lord said He's taking away the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water. The Lord is going to remove, before the Lord take your food and bread, your food and water away, He's going to remove your comfort, your protection, and your foundation, which is the so-called white man, to 2/3 of our people. That's what Isaiah 30:12 said. They trust in oppression. To take plunder and to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited. And again, a people gathered from the nation. And this is also talking about the state of Israel too. It's going to be wasted. Who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land, right? So here we say, hey, you will make an evil plan. God deliberately pulled God and his allies to come against Israel, right? Which is Israel is the people before it's the place. At the same time, God was prompted by his own evil plan, by the thoughts in his own mind. Yahweh did not drag an unwilling God to come against Israel. No, that's a lie. See, he going off. It's not. Nobody controls nothing. It's the Lord. Here, right here, though, B, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. The first evil thought God had against Israel was to attack them because they seemed defenseless as they were gathered back into the land. So, I want to show you that. Now, when you go to Ezekiel, right? Not Ezekiel, Joel 2, right? When you start at verse, I'm going to start at 1. Blow the trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh cometh, for it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, which is different governments, a great people and a strong, that have not been ever the like, which is talking about the intercontinental ballistic missiles. Neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devours before them the missiles, the warheads, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the garden of Eden before them. See, this is what it said in Ezekiel 38. They at peace. They live in peaceable. They at rest. Right? Yeah. It say, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yeah, and nothing shall escape them. Talking about the intercontinental ballistic missiles. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the top of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble. As a strong people set in battle array, like Isaiah 9:5 reads, before their face the people shall be much pain, all faces shall gather blackness, they shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war, they shall march everyone on his way, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall one thrust another, they shall walk everyone in his path. Look at this. And when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. When you go to the word fall upon the sword, look at this, man. Let's go to translation, right? Look at this. NLT. They never jostle each other. Each moves in exactly the right position. They break through the fences without missing a step. And the other one right here is in NIV. They do not jostle. They do not jostle each other. Each marches straight ahead. They plunge through the fences without breaking ranks. So, the unwalled villages is talking about America that don't have a defense system. Just like Israel don't have a defense system for what Russia has, man. So anyway, I just want to show this. Because the Lord is really stirring up the guard, man. And as the guard said, hey, you want to trade your Western liberal ways for Russian more values, come to Russia. Anyway, I just want to go through this. I mean to be this long-winded, but Lord wills edify. I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh. Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rikah Quadash. The abundance of the apostles, elder bishops, and elders of great millstone who teach well, who are the apostles and elders of all the Israel, whether accepted or not. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim, believing this truth and pushing the truth with the four winds of the earth. The entire world shedding light to the whole elect. Shalom to the hot wealth will listen learning. If you assist will listen learning. While tuning in, may Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai continue to bless you in your houses. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Till next time I say Shalom. Hey, the Lord said he made the world for Israel's sake. All this is going to happen because 2/3 of our people are living comfortable. They trust in the self-proclaimed so-called white man. So the Lord is going to remove your comfort, your protection, your foundation, and then he's going to take away your food and water. But you know what's crazy? Hey, Jacob trouble coming. The Lord finna take away your food and water, man. All you out there that trust in the self-proclaimed so-called white man, you're going to die a grievous death, man. Because you trust in oppression and perverseness and stay there wrong. Therefore, this iniquity, what's the iniquity? You trust in oppression. Therefore, this iniquity shall be to you as a breach ready to fall, swelling out in the high wall, who breaking coming suddenly at the instance, man. Hey, and Putin is an Edomite. He's just a better Edomite for destruction. Hey, the Lord is cold because he got these people thinking they got a better option. Well, the better option is still to destroy you. You heathen nations, man. The better